Teamsters will not endorse Kamala Harris. Now, they aren't endorsing Donald Trump either, at least not yet. This is a blow to Democrats. The union's president, Sean O'Brien, told The Hill on Wednesday that it would not be throwing its weight behind the Harris-Walz ticket because, quote, both candidates didn't commit on the core issues that we need to get accomplished on behalf of our members. This marks only the third time that the Teamsters have declined to endorse a presidential candidate. Now, in recent elections, they've endorsed Democratic candidates, including, of course, President Biden in the 2020 cycle.
The union remains at odds with both candidates over what it wants. O'Brien told The Hill that while Harris signaled support for the PRO Act, or Protecting the Right to Organize Act, she failed to adequately explain how she would help get it passed. The PRO Act would strengthen workers' ability to form a union and negotiate with their employers, and opposing the national right to work efforts. O'Brien was one of the speakers, of course, at this year's Republican National Convention held in Milwaukee, leading many to believe that the Teamsters would surely endorse Trump. Adding to this speculation, the union's PAC donated $45,000 to the Republican National Committee for the first time in 2 decades. Then there's the union polling. In a Teamsters Commission survey in July through mid-September, a majority of Teamsters, 59.6% to be exact, voted to endorse Donald Trump versus 34% for Vice President Harris. Of note, polling conducted before Biden dropped out of the race showed Teamsters preferred Biden to Trump 44.3% to 36.3%. Certainly a very big blow, I think, to the Harris campaign. This is something that was likely expected, in the fact that all the other building trades have lined up behind the Harris-Walz ticket in recent weeks.
But how could they do otherwise when the members polled support Trump? You might actually argue that they should have gone further and actually endorsed him, given that that's where the members are. I think this shows a couple things. I think this shows, in one way, the weakness of Kamala Harris as a candidate. Obviously, we've talked about some of her advantages and some of her polling certainly being better than Biden's. But one way in which she is not as strong a candidate, even as Joe Biden was, is that Joe Biden clearly had a better relationship with organized labor, a major constituency of the Democratic Party that I know has felt taken advantage of by Democrats for years, and now resulting in this situation. Reactions have been very interesting. Ted Cruz wrote on Twitter, the Teamsters declining to endorse Kamala Harris is symptomatic of what we've already known. The Democratic Party is no longer the party of working Americans. The Democratic Party belongs to coastal elites who only care about climate extremism and radical trans ideology. If you're a working American who feels abandoned by the Democratic Party, the Republicans will welcome you with open arms. And then on the other side, Nancy Pelosi tore into the Teamsters, saying their decision not to endorse Harris-Walz is disappointing. Donald Trump refused to support a pension bill for Teamsters. It was Biden-Harris Democrats who saved that without a single Republican vote. So there's a lot of bitterness. I saw
it's a
AOC
mixed reaction from both
things.
sides of the aisle, certainly, of this news. I think one of the interesting things that, of course, we saw from the Harris-Walz campaign say, this is a vice president who's stood by workers, stood on a picket line in support of striking workers, and pointed to the conversation that Donald Trump had with Elon Musk, where he said, if workers are striking, we're going to fire them. But certainly your point, there is a disconnect, I think, between a lot of these union leadership, right, that fall in line behind the Democratic Party, and their members, especially with the building trades, of which the Teamsters have a big population of kind of white working class individuals.
I think it's more of a cultural connection or cultural affinity now for the Republican Party, more so than it is any policy difference, because, to be fair to Nancy Pelosi, someone I don't agree with very much, she's right that the Democrats still remain more committed to policies that favor big labor than many Republicans, although some Republicans talk a lot about labor, and people like J.D. Vance working on issues having to do with labor, rail, and other issues. What happened in East Palestine, Ohio, all of that is key. But there's still the Republican elites. The Republican Party is still the party of the Chamber of Commerce. Is still the party of right to work, of not being in support of a lot of policies that, at the highest level, unions want to see happen, but their members feel more comfortable associating with the Republican Party.
There's certainly a disconnect with leadership and the members, and this is going to have an outsized role in some of these key battleground states. There's big populations of Teamsters in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, across the industrial kind of Midwest, key states that both the former president and the vice president need to have in their column. It's also being reported that some of the locals have endorsed the vice president, are mobilizing for her. But again, not to have that national nod, I think is going to be critically important. Did
Kamala Harris screw this up? Was there something she could have done to get this endorsement if she met with them more frequently or promised them more? Because you're right that this is going to hurt her, even if it hurts her just a little bit. In Michigan, Pennsylvania, it's the end of the election. It's the end. It's over.
Yeah, and again, this goes back, the union has endorsed the Democrats over the last 3 decades. I think the last time was in 1996 when they didn't endorse Bill Clinton's reelection. I don't know. I think to your point in the intro, I think it's the longstanding relationships that Joe Biden had with organized labor that led to that automatic endorsement. He's certainly a different candidate. But I think the vice president went out of her way to, I think, court all of organized labor for the most part. This is the only national union that hasn't transferred their endorsement from President Biden to the vice president. I don't know if there's anything else she likely could have done. I think there's some dynamics with Sean O'Brien, the head of the Teamsters. Obviously, he took on a role at the convention in Milwaukee for Donald Trump. It was a speech. I was there on the floor. It was a speech that was widely panned because he actually, he said some supportive things of Donald Trump, but then really castigated Republicans for a lot of their anti-worker positions, right to work being one of them. But it's certainly an interesting, dynamic now, less than 7 weeks out from the election, because there's real mobilization that unions can do with their members, getting them to the polls and things like that.
I mean, there's a lot of blaming going on from Democrats on Sean O'Brien himself, but I don't know what else he could have done, given that his members vote, their polling, the survey is that they preferred Donald Trump. Well, this is not the only dissatisfied group within the Democratic coalition. I also saw just this morning that the Uncommitted movement has refused to endorse Kamala Harris, although it's a little confusing. So these are, people who wanted you to vote uncommitted instead of for Joe Biden in the primary process as a protest against the administration's Israel-Palestine policy. They say now that they will not support Kamala Harris, but they do not want you to vote for Donald Trump because they say his views on Gaza will be even worse. And then they also don't want you to vote for third-party candidates because that will just help Trump. So then it's like,
well, what do you do?
Okay, I don't know. So you are supposed to vote for Kamala Harris. You're just not supposed to, take their word for it or something. So I was going. I got it until that last part. I mean, if you think that it's a genocide and you think that the Democratic Party's position on this is unacceptable and you think Donald Trump is going to be just as bad or worse, then I don't know why you wouldn't just come out and endorse like Jill Stein or Chase Oliver.
Or the Libertarian candidate
whoever.
or something
my
like
guy,
that. Yeah.
So, but they're saying don't vote for Kamala Harris, but don't vote for anyone else.
Well, of course,
and don't not vote.
And don't
I guess vote for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, write someone in, write in your spouse, I guess, on that presidential level. Yeah, it seems a little silly. I think there was a lot made of that dynamic in the primaries when Joe Biden was still at the top of the ticket running. Certainly, there was a good number of that population, especially in that Michigan primary. I think that's what we were talking about just a few months ago that voted uncommitted. I think with this guidance from that movement, though, I think it's really leaving it up to the individual voter to decide, and we'll see what happens.
Let us know what you think. We'll be back with more Rising right after this.